Sophie, thanks for joining us.
All right, welcome everyone. Hey.
Hello.
So I'm in direct from Bombay Play, not from Bombay. Listen carefully. I'm actually here still in Bengaluru, in
Indranagar.
I have to say it properly. Indranagar, which is also a district from Bangalore. It's the Berlin of Bangalore to me. It was super cool staying here. That's why I say here we are in the hipster studio of Bangalore. And yeah, super cool to be here. It's my last day in Bangalore, so I make it count. With Oliver Jones here, the CEO co-founder of Bombay Play, one of the gaming studio in Bangalore.
Good to be here.
Before we start even introducing what the company is doing, where it is today, maybe through your own journey in gaming, because before Bombay Play, which is a company, I will say from what I read on the website, focused on making hypersocial genres games and serving the world in the casual market, but we'll get into that. Who are you? What have you done before? What are you doing in India?
I'm still not quite sure what I'm doing here, Sophie, but I'm here, so I'm making the most of it. You know, I think you know the feeling. Yeah, funny story. I came here 10 years back to do a podcast, and in reality, like soon after graduation, I shifted to Bangalore to work with Zynga as a game designer, and after that, we've kind of figured at Zynga, there's nothing they were doing as a global company that we couldn't just make ourselves locally. So myself and a few other people broke away and we made a company called Moonfrog, which today employs over 200 people here in Bangalore, just down the road. Mm-hmm. And the idea was to make content for the Indian market specifically. Moonfrog was sold to Stillfront a few years ago, and I moved on to Bombay Play to sort of build content in India for the world. In between, I had a stint at Glu Mobile as well in Hyderabad before returning to Bangalore. So
okay.
Yeah, it's sort of approximately how the journey has been thus far.
And what I love about how you talk about the journey, which is also, I had the same feeling as well with my previous interview, you talk about it in such a uneventful way, like something mundane that has happened. Oh, I built a company, was sold, and then, and then one thing to another, my next company.
Yeah.
And I think this is also the attitude here, where there's some success. It's building a company, scaling, which is still like big, and building a second, which is funded as well. The attitude also of humility and keeping learning, in which I love, because the day you start to think you're on the top and you stop learning, being curious, this is the start of the end.
I agree. Like the problem with success is sometimes you think you're able to make waves, but in reality we're just all looking for waves to get in front of.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't make markets myself. I just follow them.
Yeah, and let's get into some bits of your journey, because it's quite interesting here for the ones who don't know also the history of at least Bengaluru, some of the studio Hyderabad. There's the Glu, the Zynga and EA and GSN, now owned by Scopely, which I believe is a generation of a lot of knowledge and people in games focused on the product. So you come from product, right?
Yeah.
Before going and building your own thing, and then wow, something happened. And especially I wanted to hear a second part about Ludo games, which is also a notable success, because what was the thesis of building a game for the Indian market, and what were maybe the specificities that you learned from that time, and how to make revenues, success in the Indian market?
Okay, I'll answer. So first, to do with the sort of ecosystem question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the first part was ecosystem. Second is, why did we decide that? Why were we foolish enough to figure we even had a chance to make a difference in the gaming space? So yeah, you're right. So it's a lot of the way the ecosystem has worked is that companies have built sort of external studios here in India to, well, one is cost optimization for sure, but also to leverage the local talent in terms of engineers and artists. And I think even these days, sort of technical artists and other more sort of gaming specific roles more readily available in India. So that's where EA, Ubisoft, Glu, and Scopely, Zynga all saw sort of an opportunity, and you know, it wasn't by chance. They considered every country and saw that, you know, India was the best candidate to build their external sort of studios from scratch. You know, they weren't built through acquisitions, they were built themselves as by the companies, by, you know, concerted effort of a lot of people. And yes, there was a skill gap for sure in some areas, and that's why folks like me ended up here. But to be honest, I was just a fresher in college.
Yeah.
So I think even though I was filling the gap of game design, and that was my passion throughout my studies and, you know, and my postgrad, I still wasn't like very experienced, but I was still sort of somewhat more knowledgeable about the gaming space than perhaps those who were trying to run the studio over here. So I received a call and, you know, hey Oliver, why don't you come to Bangalore? We need somebody who is a diehard gamer to try and run these social games that Zynga was making out of Bangalore. And yeah, what do you think about the opportunity? And maybe they just, the reason why companies have hired young people like me is because, you know, I think professionals with many years of experience, it's harder to convince them to move. Whereas college graduates, it's a bit easier because there's fewer sort of ties to where you are. So yeah, so that's how I ended up here. And although like I had some knowledge of gaming, and you know, I played a lot of games, I studied games, but I had very little like actual industry experience. So I was very much on the same level as everyone else, to be honest. It's just I was a diehard gamer, where everyone else sort of came into gaming because it became a viable career choice. Now, I think that gap of knowledge was a problem, but it was also, I think, what we call a boon. Because we didn't know how much we didn't know, it gave us the conviction that we could build great things and compete with players all around the world. So I think it spurred a lot of innovation and ambitious thinking, simply because we didn't know.
Yeah. Good sometimes.
Yeah, it's good sometimes.
It's genuine, you know, genuine naiveness. Let's get into it and then let's do something.
Yeah, like you have this feel, oh, these people in the US, people in Europe, what do they know anyway? There's nothing we can't do. Let's build it ourselves. Let's take on the world. And that's where sort of we decided to spin out and start, well, my first startup, Moonfrog. And we really had nothing, but we had like a very, I would say, rather unprofessional looking pitch deck. And we managed to raise our seed round of funding from Sequoia, and it was like $1 million. And this was sort of 3 years into my career, so I was like, wow. $1 million, that's so much money. And, you know, I think quickly I realized how little money that is to run a studio.
It can go quickly.
Yeah, and it only gives you really, I mean, in India you can bootstrap. If you really want to lower your living costs, you can. You know, don't eat the fancy food, don't go for the fancy coffee, don't go for the fancy apartment, you know, live humbly, and you can increase your personal burn rate. All you need is a laptop, and you can compete with anybody around the world. And I believe this is something President Obama once said, like, a kid in Bangalore can compete with anyone around the world, and it's totally true. So we got that $1 million, we stretched it out as much as we can and tried to experiment. We made some games that failed, but eventually we decided maybe competing with the world wasn't our strength at that time, because, you know, with a few people with
Which
three...
year was that?
Gosh, the 2013 onwards, yeah.
Yeah, so starting to also... yeah, when I joined... So mobile was rising with the casual games, yes.
Yeah, that was our story, like,
Candy Crush was already out, yeah.
Yeah, Candy Crush was out, Zynga was slow to move on mobile.
Yes.
And I think we were just about one of the new teams on the block that really wanted to execute on mobile. So I think simply by virtue of being the only game in town, Sequoia gave us a check, like, okay, fine, let's see what they do. But yeah, we quickly realized even at that time, we weren't quite prepared to compete with, there were already established players in various in pretty much all the categories that we could think of at the time. So we decided, let's think a bit more local, let's see what's popular. And yeah, we saw that, some local casino games were doing very well. So we followed the Zynga way of fast following, aka copying what was already there. And I think we ended up coming like second place in the local like Indian poker category, which is otherwise known as Teen Party. And that was really our start. Like with that small budget of, just $1 million, we launched a game that got some traction, and then we were able to raise the follow-on round.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it was that this is an example of, we saw a trend, we just jumped on the trend rather than trying to create a trend ourselves.
And deliver quickly, I believe, right?
Yes, it was, I believe, less than a month to develop.
Wow, really?
The game, yeah.
And so it took off and generated your revenue where you could also be profitable and start to grow, because when you started, like, you were a few people and then 200, right? So that happened
in between.
In 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah, well, so my journey with Moonfrog kind of ended around 4 years in, I'd say.
Okay, yeah.
Like after our Series A round of funding, I figured like, this is it.
You went to Series A as well.
Yeah, Series A. Series A, we raised another $15 million. So then it was like more serious money. I believe at the time that was one of the biggest fundraisers for a gaming company in India. So it was a big deal back then. But I think I personally lost confidence in like the strategy we were building. And so I think that led to sort of my aspirations being misaligned with what the company really wanted to try and execute on. And I think, I was somewhat correct, somewhat incorrect in that assumption. I was pretty glad. I feel like the right decision was made to part ways, because at Bombay Play, the value has been created here as well, which is equal or more to what I would have made by staying. So I think I would have regretted not trying building for the world had I stayed trying to continue to execute for the Indian market in the casual casino space. Yeah.
And you raised an important point maybe for as a co-founder, because in the journey, reflect with yourself that this is not anymore the place or what you want to do, and acknowledge this to yourself to move on or move out, because it's not doing a favor to anyone, neither yourself, also the people who are counting on you. If you see yourself, this is not maybe the journey for me, whatever, if it's the right journey or not. But this is a practice that I believe should happen more. Like, there are different stages of a company and it makes things change. And the reason why your co-founder started and where it goes is not always there along the whole journey, and that's also okay, right?
Yeah, I do believe, lots of people work very hard, but so I believe like professional poker players know when to, fold their hands far more than amateurs do. They know when to quit better, So I figured when I was looking at market data at that time, and really making my own qualitative and quantitative assessment of what was happening, I just ended up not believing in the story anymore. And I could be wrong in that, but I think largely it hasn't been proved yet. I think we'll see over time. The Indian market is still growing very, very rapidly. That remains to be true, but I think it's the kind of content that you make makes a lot of difference. So there is a wave of the India GDP and middle upper class growth. That is a very valid, and the data speaks for itself. There's not really an opinion about it. But what content are they consuming, I think is because there's lots of sort of content out there, and a lot of the downloads seem to be going towards more globalized content, I see. So I still have that doubt that sort of reskinning content to make it more culturally relevant, whether that's really a winning strategy or not. So that's where there was a dissonance. And as you were saying, as a leader, I couldn't lead the team with that doubt in my mind.
If you were, your heart wasn't there. And that's a good segue to having a team delivering for the local market to developed in India to the global. And it's a debate I've heard actually quite many times through the conversation. What is the potential of the market in India? And some companies have been very deliberate. We want to focus, we believe we are part of the journey. And some others like yours as well are focused on global. So I'd like to hear as well the transition and what was the thought at the times, the intention of building Bombay Play. A question I ask often is, did it start more with a vision of a kind of company, the places you wanted to build, how people would work, or the type also of games, like more focused as well on the impact on players and what you wanted to bring to the world, you know, with the games you create?
I think our origin story is not quite as, it's not very simple as having an aha moment and going out and starting a business around it as the typical kind of entrepreneur journey is. Our story was more along the lines of, we knew there were lots of opportunities in gaming, but we weren't sure, we weren't sure what they were, but we also understood that ideas are very cheap. Execution is more important, and we wanted to be in a position where we could execute on the ideas or on the opportunities that were coming up. So we decided it was better to be in the game and building rather than to be sitting on the sidelines. So that's really like where Bombay Play, Abbas and myself, my co-founder, got together and said, yeah, we're not sure what the future holds, but we'll be there to seize it when it comes.
So you started basically more with the people, the team, like, well, let's continue something together, and let's figure out later.
It's like the faith that you can figure it out. We'll figure it out when we see it. But it was kind of now or never. If we had waited too long for the right opportunity, we might not be at the right phase in our lives to take a leap on it. So so we started, and we figured it had a bias for action, really, and just started building. And maybe we built a bit too much and tried too many things. Maybe we should have focused more, but what we did, build like a nice, sustainable company, and we didn't raise any funding until we were at least like $1 million in ARR. Yeah,
that part is interesting. So you bootstrapped for that time. How did you bootstrap? How many were you, and how long?
We were 3 people, and we bootstrapped with 3 people for I think nearly 1 year.
Oh wow! Okay. And generating your first revenues until you say, okay, we have something.
And with 3 people, we reached $1 million in in annual revenue and global
market.
In the global market.
What was that game?
It was a game called Card Party.
Okay.
You can think of it as it's a Uno game with wizards and tornadoes and magic powers. It's like we saw that our strength. We were building on our strength really with card games. We had built it before in the casino space. So we figured, let's make a more casual card game with casino mechanics. And so we took the concept of Uno that everyone is very familiar with, changed it here and there, and added in sort of social casino on top of it. And we saw there was very little competition in the space other than like the official Uno app. So we figured, if we're number 2, it'll be good enough. So, and that's how it is today. Like you search for the Uno keyword, and we've done enough ASO to make sure that, the official Uno app comes up, and then Card Party is right next to it. So you can try both if you're an Uno fan and see which one you like.
That's a very good also product strategy to really go for the segments and aiming like for that number 2, like, okay, number 1 is taken, but how can we surf and creating the best after the number 1, right?
Yeah, it's also like the mobile gaming market in terms of sort of, if you look at it in terms of products with jobs that need to be done, I guess using that framework, pretty much every single sort of user motivation is taken care of, from the hyper casual to the core and everything in between. And then even the console is taken care of, mobile is taken care of, and then every single interest is taken care of. So by multiple competitors who are very high quality. So I'd say it's like approaching a perfect market. So like when you're in that state, if the market's in that state, then it's really only efficiency gains which separate the winners from everyone else. So if you can find an efficiency gain over the top players, then you stand a chance of winning, either through sort of engagement, monetization or distribution. Yeah. So in the case of Card Party, we saw that the official Uno app, for example, would never use ads, because why would you put ads? At least at the time, I'm not sure what they're doing now. But we could monetize better if we made an app that, you know, was similar but had all the best practices in monetization. Obviously, the big disadvantage is that you cannot use the brand, but you can sort of have the same look and feel. People know what the same mechanics you can use. So so we figured there was an efficiency gain possible there, and we took advantage of it, and we ended up doing pretty well.
But the way you talk about it is so casual, but it's also very intentional. Exactly, like really aiming for the homes and delivering. So you had also you were doubling down on your strengths. So that's important to mention. So you didn't pursue just another segment like, okay, let's figure it out. So it was very focused as well, intentional, and then delivering quickly and achieving, because it sounds like you repeated a bit not the story, but the same principle on how to approach the launch at Moonfrog Labs to what you started with Bombay Play, right? The same. And what I like as well, it's maybe more appreciated these days, because raising capital out of an idea is rare, almost impossible, especially for a mobile game. And the good bootstrapping days when you start, because you actually focus on the main thing to start to build the foundation of your company. And as you have worked together as well with your co-founder before, you know you are your culture by who you are, like as a people together. And in the journey of Bombay Play, you started in 2018 to 2023 today, so it's been 5 years. I wanted to understand also here a bit more about the journey. So it's great to hear about the first product. After having that first million revenues, raising, and then having suddenly capital, how did you start to build the studio, hiring, growing? You said like you were 60 people today. And I see also a lot of intention in your culture, this brand on your website, about caring, really creating a place that is inclusive, diversity, which I'll come back to that. A progressive place, which was an interesting choice of words. So I want to understand as well, like from product, as you get your first success, how did that translate when building the studio and that cool, very cool studio where we're in today, 5 years later?
Gosh. Yeah, the issue when you're very small, just 3 people, like, is just your first few hires. How do you sit them in a meeting room and say, this is going to be big, come join us? And you're not in a place where people are organically reaching out to you, because you don't have a brand. You don't. So we really had to sort of differentiate ourselves, and we chose to be, I guess, the most. And this is from how we present ourselves in public and how we act sort of within Bombay Players. Like, we always try and act with, inclusively and with authenticity. So. I mean, you saw yourself, like, on LinkedIn, we're posting, like, videos all the time of just random stuff. And we're trying to show our real selves and bring our real selves to work and show our real selves on social media. And I think people appreciate that. It's like a breath of fresh air, especially in, like, a very corporate culture that you see everywhere. And we can get away with it because we're a startup. There's no com sign off on anything. And that's how we sort of began to grow on social media. And then after a time, we found that people started reaching out to us. As for who we hired, we did obviously the standard kind of criteria filtering for experience and the knowledge, I suppose. But we also looked for people who we got a sense they really had something to prove. That's who we were ourselves. We wanted to prove that you can build a gaming company in India for the world, like build content for the world. And so we hired people who could, we felt strongly aligned with that vision that, damn it, I can do this, and I want to show the world I can do this, and this is the company where I can prove myself.
So although that word doesn't do justice of what it really means, like a hungry mindset, having ambitions, wanting to do something, big, making an impact.
It does take all sorts, however, to build a company. Not everyone is going to be super hungry. And I think especially as we reach sort of around 60 employees, I'd say some people are here because they like the relaxed atmosphere, and they like the culture of trust we also have, where there's no deadlines coming in from above. People are giving their own, and we're following a very agile sort of process. So, and other people are here to really push and really, we try to cater to both, and we try to make it clear that not everybody is in the same phase of life, so respect that.
Yeah. I have a question more about like cultures and ways of working, because I came here also with an open mind to discover, understand, okay, it's very different way how teams work here with a cultural factor. Having worked also with Asian teams where, you know, there's historically a lot of hierarchy. I was imagining maybe there's some structure like this, but I discovered through all the companies, at least the second generation, a really more flatter structure, a lot of code based on collaboration. Even several founders actually were telling me, here we make games among friends, you know, that's the mood. And it was very familiar to me, because that's how I worked at Wooga, at Rovio. What are your observations about, I don't know if it's been an evolution or it's been just normal, living in India, you spend more time, and the expectation of people who would come to a gaming studio, is this an expected way of working, like you have to collaborate, friendly?
I would agree largely, but it also depends on which India you're in. Like India is a very diverse place, and not everyone has that, not everyone can adapt to that mindset. I'd say it's still very much like a Silicon Valley notion of way of working that we've kind of adopted because we've worked in Silicon Valley kind of companies, offices that have set up here, and but like if you go to like tier 2 and beyond sort of cities in India, you'll find that the working culture is very different sometimes. Not always, but you know, I can't, like India's so huge, you can never just say it's like this or like that. But I've certainly been to offices where it's just like lots of people crammed into small places, and it's very hierarchical. I've even been on these considered acquisitions of these kind of companies because the talent is very good, but eventually been sort of have to think twice because like the cultures just will never match. That's not to say that people who don't work in our kind of culture are miserable or like are worse off or anything. I just think it's a very different working culture. Like the expectations are very different depending on what your life experience is. We work this way, and I think it's difficult for some people to sort of adapt to a very open and, you know, nobody's telling you what to do. We expect you to sort of come to us and tell us what to do. But I think just as a manager of people, for me, it's really important to just have a deeper understanding of what everybody's expectations are and what they really need to do their job well. Some people really need that little bit of direction and validation, and it's very unfair to somebody who really wants direction to not give them any. You know?
Right.
And you're kind of setting them up to fail in that sense. But if you give them an objective, and then they're set up to succeed. Whereas others don't really want you to tell them how to do their job. I think a part of being inclusive is to identify both sides. On the part about building games amongst friends, I can't say that I can understand the idea, but I'm not fully behind the idea. I am a believer in, like, you know, we are a sports team, but the sports team analogy doesn't quite sit right with me either, because in a sports team, how do you make room for, I don't know, women in labor? That doesn't work. You have to have an empathetic sort of culture as well. You can't just be a sports team that is always about results if you snooze, you lose kind of thing. But I like the sports team analogy in the sense that we're here for a purpose, we're here to work together, and it's about clear, like, there's a reason we've assembled, and it's to take on the world and to win the championship, you know? And the other teams are all the other gaming studios all across the world. And we have to compete on a high level, and that's very much a sports mentality. But at the same time, you have to be inclusive of the kind of minds that you bring together.
My impression is maybe beyond more of being a friend definition, it's friendly. I think it's more the environment is friendly. But it's also very business oriented, like from the conversation I've seen. So it's a balance, right? But there isn't an attitude of friendliness. I mean, it's a gaming community, so
yeah, like friendliness should come naturally.
yeah.
If
Yeah.
like also as a startup, you have limited time. You don't have time for assholes, and you don't have time for people who waste your time.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So, if any regrets I have would be not acting fast enough when you have people like that on the team. So yeah, I think just acting fast and making sure your culture stays as good as possible is important. Not, I guess, don't be tolerant of intolerance.
Yeah. It seems you also are very clear about those principles because you have done a journey as well by building companies, so exiting and also starting it over again. So I'm sure you have seen many team structure and have formed your own idea of what works for you, and then it translates again into what the studio is today and how it's formed. Going back to some thoughts on product, I find it really challenging to compete with the rest of the world. So I'll ask you more like, what are your tech when it comes to competitive advantage, right? So if you're competing with the rest of the world, what is different that you do that gives you also a different door, right? I think anyway, there's some already elements of it when you tried to serve the world in your first game. But if you could verbalize it in some elements of it, I don't know if it's you, the people.
Yeah, I mean, you could say the team is awesome and that's our strength, but I think a lot of these days in gaming, everyone has an awesome team at the top, sort of, let's say 100, 200 games have awesome teams behind them, mostly, I guess.
Yeah.
So you can't really say that's what makes you different. But I would say that we're particularly good at failing fast.
Yeah.
Because that's how we've been trained over here. Sort of, we're used to running these sprints, especially like pre-IPO Zynga days, where every single week we needed to show numbers, we needed to show growth. What did we ship? What features did we ship that drove those numbers? And we went through that iteration week over week. It was a full product review weekly. So, and our team sizes there would be 60 or so people. So we would have multiple sort of pods going simultaneously so that we were able to have that level of cadence.
That's intense. Huh?
Yeah, it's very intense, and that's how we were trained to operate. And so when starting a company, we just took that same philosophy to launching products.
I think it's great given the market. You don't know what works, and by the time you tested something that worked 6 months later, it may not be that hot. So you have to be quick, right? To get the signal and deliver. So
yeah, especially when you're trying to find blue spots in a red ocean.
Yeah.
Like when you're like going back to like finding efficiency gains on engagement, like that's a very hard problem, and that's the problem that you really need years to 10x the quality of the competition. So what we try and do here is identify like, okay, so for example, right now we're going after a genre we're calling puzzle PvP. We see that there are lots of, the puzzle gaming category is very strong globally. It seems to be rather region agnostic as well.
Yeah.
So it's inclusive for India as well as everyone else.
Yeah.
Except it seems like the category is very much female skewed in many places. And by introducing PvP, you can bring more males to the category, but also engage the female audience as well in a more sort of a familiar game, but in a more sort of competitive environment. And therefore also driving monetization efficiencies over the existing sort of puzzle games. We see it as a kind of fresh category, and although folks like King.com have tried competitive modes in Candy Crush now with really great results, like if you see King's quarterly results, they see Candy Crush is still growing somehow, and a lot of that is kind of driven by these big bold bets that they're doing, which is driving a bit more competition, a bit more spend through sort of catering to that sort of motivator in their player base. And then I think more recently, like Candyvore is one of the biggest fundraisers so far this year with 100 million in PE funding. So we are seeing signals. It's not a lot of data, but it's enough for a small company like ours to get a bit of conviction and think it's a worthy bet to spend our time on. And we don't see too many competitors in the space. And it's also, we think not many people are really, I think especially post 2021, the industry is becoming a bit risk averse and instead doubling down on their winners versus trying new games. So we feel like we're well positioned to take advantage of what we can see. We can also be wrong. We'll find out.
And then you correct because you're quick to rebounds and so on, so that's fine as well.
Yeah, so like our typical timeline to getting to what we would call a qualitative test, which is sort of using a peer review group, is around 6 months, just sort of before release. In the early alpha beta builds, we would get those tested, and we actually have gates where if the play testers are not rating the game high enough, we then do another sort of sprint to try and improve, and then we test it again and test it again until we feel like it's at least good enough to get put onto the store and, you know, start running sort of test campaigns to get, you know, data.
So 6 months
for
a good, I would say, it's not slice, but a good version of the game with
an MVP, a minimal lovable product, maybe. 6
months from concept to go to soft launch, basically, market test. Okay, that's actually quite fast as well, especially if you have all the layers that you measure, I guess, with monetization and so on. So what we were trying to, what we were doing with our casual studio in the hyper casual at Voodoo, like trying exactly to break those process of long time where you have everything perfect before you launch, have something that you feel a bit sorry for when you launch, and then see the signals, right? Say, okay, and it's worth investing more and so on. So that's very interesting. And back to the puzzle social competition around the Match Master. I saw it like for many years ago, and it took some time for them to figure out exactly the UX, the play, and I think there's more probably to do there with different mechanics, with the social play, but it's a lot of iteration. So I see also more persistent for whoever is passionate about the topic. And so I do see as well an opportunity there, but it's execution, as you said.
Exactly, and it's finding the right mechanic that is well suited for PvP as well. Because match 3 just about fits.
It is tricky,
It's very tricky, and they managed to make it work, which is a great result. It took them 4 years, but thankfully now, you know, we can look at them and and say, oh, okay, this is what they did, and hopefully use that as a bit of their learnings, as give us a bit of a head start in our own endeavor to try and crack our own space. We're not going after match 3, but you know, try and maybe we think PvP can extend to different kind of categories within puzzle. But it's a design challenge, and I think what we've realized is you just need to have a strong conviction somehow, even though you have a good, you can look at the market, get as much data as you can possibly get, and feel like, get conviction over the bet, but you'll never know what your metrics are until the game is out. So until your game is out, like as in not just soft launched, but you know, out there in the wild, will you really know what your actual data is, you know? And even then, only once you scale, you know.
That's the ultimate test. Can you scale, and can you scale profitably? And that's a long journey, so from the moment you test, there are other hurdles. So we follow this journey with the game, like you already revealed, like publicly, like also like sharing your test and your learning. And my last question, as being mindful of our time, it's like, by the way, is it Friday night? No, it's Tuesday night. I feel like it's Friday night.
Time difference between Germany
and the Diwali holiday is coming soon. That's why I thought it was a weekend coming. My last question is, based on all which you shared, you have had a journey of 5 years. Thinking back about it, what are maybe with the second company key learning on top of your head, and maybe feeling of regret of something you wish you knew but you didn't know, and well, that happened. So more like a quick retrospective on 5 years in the company.
I mean, we did, at the same time, it was challenging to find like product market fit. So we did try a lot of things.
how many?
Yeah, how many? We've killed 20 games in 5 years. Yeah.
That's good, a good ratio.
Yeah.
You're a pro killer.
Yeah,
Yes,
pro killer.
Yeah.
It might be over 20 games even.
Yeah,
I'm not.
but that's great. That's how you get the learnings, right?
Yeah. So I'm happy we did all of those experiments and I'm happy we killed them. Some of them we probably kept going for too long, you know? Yeah, so I do regret not killing some of those projects faster. And I think I also regret maybe we did some IP deals as well. I probably shouldn't say which ones, but we did some IP deals that I think we got us stuck for a little bit longer than we otherwise would have liked into like building stuff for other people, which I think the problem with IP deals is that you realize faster than the IP owner that it's not working.
Yeah, and that's a sad moment for them. It's like, sorry, I'm breaking this relationship.
Yeah, it's like, well, I love your IP, and it's a great IP, but it's just, you know, the data is what it is. Yeah.
Not much of the audience and the genre. Most of the time, that's usually that.
Yeah, it is. So, but when you sign these contracts, sometimes it's like 1 year of maintenance, and you know it's tough to break. So maybe, you know, for the sake of like short-term cash, I know we weren't funded at the time, and it was very tempting, so we did it. But I do wish that we maybe just stuck to our guns for a bit longer. That would have given us a bit of. Probably would have saved us like 6-7 months of bandwidth, I think, which is very important.
Yeah,
you know.
yes, totally.
But nonetheless, things worked out. I think one of my learnings is that there's only really like, every quarter, there's maybe only one decision that matters. And then all the other decisions that you make are not consequential, really. So the skill is really identifying which is the decision that is the important one that you should really think about. Yeah. Sometimes you end up making the important decision without too much thought. Okay, you know, make this game, it seems easy, or let's take this deal because it gives us some money. And then you're stuck with that decision for like the full quarter. So I think like prioritization of decisions would be another one.
Working with founders and gaming leaders, when you're busy running your company, making your next game, it becomes more foggy about the decisions and assessing which ones are important with which impact and what is the single one that actually matters really through the noise, right? So this is where the challenge is, and it requires discipline and other things, and you know, it's just so that's part of the challenge of an entrepreneur as well. Okay, cool.
Last question.
Yeah,
let's go.
The last
Bonus question.
No, it's more your thoughts on the Indian gaming ecosystem at that time, after like all these events, the Lumika, IGDC, and I come here fresh, seeing so many studios with exciting projects, new gaming funds being formed and investing, and also like the market reports. So what's your view going forward a bit about the studios and games that will come? Purely, you know, opinions.
Yeah, purely opinion-based, but I mean, if you look at market reports, the Indian market is poised to, I think it's like 2027 or so. The latest like Lumika report was 7.5 billion or approximately there.
Yeah.
I don't think that's wrong. I think it's quite realistic. However, I think you need to also put that in context of like the global market and where that's going. And the global market is like 250 billion thereabouts, and it is also like overall growing, so you need to figure like whether the India is the bet or there's still opportunities outside. My current bet is that the like culturally relevant Indian content will continue to thrive, and it looks like sort of monetization through just for a lot of reasons that we probably can't go into, but like the average revenue per user is likely to go up. But where those dollars are going, I think I hope it will go to local studios, but I think maybe the likelihood these days is that it's still going to go to global studios that are offering simply the best entertainment. Which is sort of generally or more broadly appealing to everyone. don't think this concept of reskinning content for local markets really works unless it's like as you say, like a nice IP and game fit. And as you may know, in your own experience, you really have to have the right game design matched with the right IP for that to really work. And that's a tough thing to do anywhere, India included. So what I do think, however, is that the quality of content being created for India, whether it be for India or abroad, will continue to sort of match what's out there. Because, you know, I feel like the studios in India really have something to prove. And I don't think there's a lack of knowledge or ability. There just is perhaps a lack of patience. Because as I was saying, we're trained to move so fast and iterate fast to find what works. But in this day and age, and it's not unusual to spend 1 or 2 years developing a game before, you know, getting it tested. So that's, in summary, the quality will continue to improve. I'm not sure how much revenue local studios will end up capturing with the India story. The India story is really for everybody. It's up for grabs. For anyone to take advantage of that or seize that opportunity.
Thanks a lot for sharing those thoughts. A lot to reflect on as well as I finish my whole report, and maybe also you can hear back from other studios their bet and tech, you know, because we have our opinions and then we have to test. Always our assumption at the end of the day, right?
I'm totally open to being wrong.
I mean,
time will tell.
Yeah, exactly. But thanks a lot for welcoming, and follow the rest at Bombay Play the games, and you know where to find Indranagar.
Indranagar.
Yes.
CMH Road.
Bye.
Bye-bye.